Greetings class, as promised, now that I'm recovered, I'm just going to make a short little video here, just kind of talking about some of the readings you had today. Obviously, we had the introduction, several of my announcements kind of talked through this stuff, but I thought I might just want to chime in here toward the end of the week, make sure you're doing okay, make sure that you're getting the most out of your readings here. Of course, we were chapters 1 through 5 this week, where we're basically talking about the beginnings of Indian civilization all the way up through the classical Indian period. So things that you really want to be looking out for here from the Vedic age, things like the development of the early caste system, the different religious traditions from Hinduism to Buddhism to Jainism, the rise politically of the Magadha, who gave way to the Mayurans and the Guptas. These were the first kind of big concentrated political entities that we would call empires. And of course, this takes us basically right up to around the year 1000, which is where we stopped, and where we'll then be able to talk more about the interplay between the Indian subcontinent and Central Asia, because of course that will play a huge part in our second week when we talk about things like the Mughals and whatnot. The other thing, of course, was you were reading the first half of Untouchables, and one thing, I don't want to talk too much about it this week because obviously you haven't had a chance to read it yet, but one of the purposes of this class is to really expose you to not only just a straightforward sort of political history, but also a social and cultural history. And that's why the novels are so important, because they try to connect you with the lived experiences of people from those societies in a way that a textbook, even a very well written book like this one, doesn't do. It's not meant to do that. So I think probably there are two scenes in this book that really stand out. It's a very short book, of course, but in the first half, the one that really stands out is where Baka is finished with his workday. And of course, by now, having started to read this, he has a job that is just, it's almost unfathomable to people living where we are when we do. But he finishes this job for the day, and he's just getting a small something to eat after a long day, and he loses his concentration for just a second, and he happens to brush against someone in the street. And the higher caste Hindu absolutely freaks out on him, degrades him physically and verbally, abuses him right in the middle of the street in front of everyone, and you feel a great deal of sympathy for him. But as of course we note during the actual scene itself, what happens is a bunch of the people who are standing by are also shouting at him, taking the side of the higher caste Hindu who is denigrating him. And I'm going to talk more about this next week when we wrap this up, in terms of how the caste system evolved over time. You've seen its origins here in things like the Rig Veda, the old Vedic text. But one thing that's important to understand about the colonial experience of a lot of places is distinctions that were, whether they were caste or clan, ethnic, linguistic, whatever, that these things tended to be very fluid, very complex. And when the British or whatever outside colonial authority arrived, they tended to formalize these things and make them more rigid, make the distinctions matter more. This was in part a way to create divisions within the society to make it easier to govern, and it was just easier for British administrators to be able to understand and govern the society based on hard and fast rules and regulations rather than to engage with or try to administer the actual very open, fluid, complex nature of those caste and occupational restrictions historically. So those are some things to be looking out for as you read finish up reading the first half of Untouchables, and then for next week obviously we'll be reading the remainder. Take your time. Make sure you are understanding the material. We only have 2 weeks to do all of a brief survey of Indian civilization. So please take your time, as much time as you can, and always email me if you have any questions. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend.